The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are our own, or those of our guests, and in no way represent the views of the companies, associations, or organizations that any of us may work for or represent. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they were told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident. You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast that explores the many pathways to an aviation profession, the challenges that a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, a professional airline pilot currently flying for a U.S. legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. Welcome aboard Flight 92 of the Squawk Ident podcast, recorded on the 15th of October, 2021, from the mobile Aviator Sound Studios high atop the 4th floor of the Hilton Garden Inn in Boston, Massachusetts. Yeah, I can actually see the runways from here. Pretty cool. On today's flight, Rob D joins me to discuss paper revisions, static discharge wicks, St. Elmos Fire, lavatory vaping, hot crew meals, and much more. We are also excited to be joined by a returning guest. Miss Christy Wong is here, and she will be sharing her experiences as she completed her initial ground school and initial operating experience at SandPiper Air. All this and more aboard Flight 92 of the Squawk Ident podcast. Let me just take this opportunity to again thank Mark Furman for joining us on Flight 91, Leadership Persistence. Rob, Captain Roger, and I were all honored in having the Colonel share his thoughts and experiences with us. Thanks again, Mark. We enjoyed having you on the show. Now that our pre-flight is complete, let's get ready to push off the gate and start those virtual podcast engines. Flight 91 is officially underway. Assisting at the controls of today's flight is a superb aviator and Squawk Ident co-host. He is a former international professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, an A&P and avionics tech, an RC aircraft commander, a boat skipper, a commercial drone operator, and currently an Airbus pilot for Legacy Airlines. The name we use here on the show is an alias to our employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. From his Unicorn Ranch, where the aircon is finally working again, but the T-storms are still striking hard. From somewhere in Flower Mound, Texas, help us in welcoming our very own Rob D. Rob, how you doing?
Hey, what's up, Tony? How you doing?
Hey, forget about it, man. As you can see in the video here, I am tired.
Yeah, look, you like to do those transcon late nights, red eyes. I don't know. I shouldn't say you like to do them, but that's what you have been doing. It looks like, and
I'm a glutton for punishment.
Those take a lot out of you.
They do. And since the last show, yes, I've had a string of days off filled with house guests, many over 80-year-olds. We were doing a parade of families' houses. At one point, we got a pretty awesome picture of all the sisters, my in-laws, and
cool,
all the aunts, and like every single one of them's over 83 years old, and some of the oldest I think was 95. So
wow,
yeah,
that's awesome.
we had a good time entertaining the family and just spending time together. 3-4 generations actually.
Wow, that is really awesome. Those are those kind of those things are rare in today's family lives, and you really just got to cherish those moments and really sit back and appreciate those times you have with the family. We did that a few times with our family, and we were able to get together a few times, and we had 3 or 4 generations all together at once. And I remember doing it as a kid, especially at like weddings and birthday parties and stuff like that. And then for some reason, just the way life and society kind of stretches you apart, you don't get to do that as much. But so when it happens, it's really special. And it's really nice. Yeah, and it was nice to have an excuse to put down the damn phone and just put it away, like not within reach, and we just left it, in a bag in the corner as we were visiting, only pulling it out for photos and whatnot. But I think when you're young, you're like, yeah, it's cool, grandma, whatever.
But as you get older, you start to realize that your time is limited. So every moment, every smile, every facial expression is captured in your mind through your eyes, and it's really something that you really can appreciate. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Nice.
And also did a lot of driving the past few weeks. A lot of driving around. I was like everyone's personal Uber driver, and also went up to Bakersfield on a day trip. My father turned 75 years old, so we had a big party at his place, and
cool.
got to meet a lot of the local friends and family that he has up there, and had a really wonderful time. Made it back Saturday evening, and guess what I did Sunday? A red eye. and it was a 3-day trip, and then I was home for about 16 hours, and then I did another 3-day trip, which is what I'm on right now. So yeah, the schedule has been relatively tedious. Is probably the best word for it. But here I am, taking all kinds of backside of the clock flying. I had to fly out of LAX because normally I'd fly out of Ontario, which is a lot closer to my house, but I had a revision that I had to take care of, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit.
Okay.
So I had to go to the crew room and pick up this revision to be legal for my next flight. It's a paper revision.
Right.
Unlike the spoiled airline pilots, is what Captain Roger would say, but that we could just push a button and all our revisions are updated in a manual. And here we are complaining about paper revisions. But I traded a trip so that I could fly out of LAX and pick that up.
There you go.
And meanwhile, I'm looking at photos of you on the Instagram fishing, catching this delicious bass here out on the lake. What were you catching out there?
Yeah, those are, I guess they call those sand bass here, maybe a whitefish. I think they're called whitefish. I don't know. I think they're whitefish, but they're basically a hybrid bass that live in the lakes here in Texas, and obviously other areas too. But yeah, they're kind of elusive fish. If once you find them, you can catch a whole bunch of them. They travel around in schools, and they're constantly moving, and they're fast moving. So it's really important to have a good fish finder and just know where some of the drop offs are around the creeks and stuff like that, and on the lake. And they live anywhere from like 15 to like 30, 40 feet of water.
Oh, wow.
So, and you really got to find like like I said, those drop offs. They like to hang out on the drop off. So you just sit there and you troll around the lake, and we're using a fishing chart to find the drop offs. So once you motor out to those areas, you look for the drop offs, and you start looking on the fish finder and just looking for a big clob of radar returns underneath the water, and that's usually the school of fish. And then once you find those, you just drop some spoons down in there, and you can pluck them out of the water. I haven't had very good success doing it, but you look at some of the fishing charters who really know what they're doing, and they're pulling 70, 100 fish out of the lake.
Oh, wow.
In one day. I'll be lucky if I get 10 to 15, but I don't have a fish finder on my boat, but my buddy has a fish finder on his boat. So with my boat, I just kind of drift in the areas that I kind of know where there's drop offs. Yeah. And I also look for the charter fishing boats out there, and I kind of just hang out in their area and just drift along and catch fish. So yeah, that was just a nice the Instagram post that you saw was just one afternoon. I decided to go out and just do some fishing by myself and caught a few fish. So it was fun.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, all I could think of was
I caught you a delicious bass.
What is that from?
That's from Napoleon Dynamite, man.
Oh, Napoleon Dynamite. That's right. Yeah, one of John Heder, one of my favorite actors.
Yeah. And so here you were, enjoying the life, fishing out on the lake, which is right by your house.
Yep.
And you also did some flying. What kind of flying did you do?
Yeah, we flew 2 3-day trips recently. So after our last episode, I went on a 3-day trip, and one of the overnights I had, which I haven't had in a while, which was a San Antonio overnight, and we stayed downtown by the Riverwalk, and it's been a while since I've been downtown, and it was so nice down there. The weather was perfect. Went out for a little exercise walk and saw the Alamo, and then hit the Riverwalk, and I walked for maybe 3 miles in one direction, turned around and came back. So, it was just perfect weather for that. And at the same time, I took advantage of the opportunity to meet up with one of our listeners, Ethan Brown, who is serving in the United States Air Force down there, and he is also working on his. He just completed his instrument training, and he's he just completed his instrument training, and now he's working on his commercial certificate now. So yeah, we got to meet up and chit chat, and met his family and his mom and dad. So it was a great opportunity to sit down and have some dinner with him and see what he's got going on and how his future is looking. So anyway, yeah, that was a great opportunity there. And let's see. And then last week I flew another 3-day trip, which was just a bear of a trip for me. I ended up deadheading about 4.5, 5 hours in one day, which is, I know how our passengers feel traveling in the back of our airplanes, because I had to do it for about 4.5 hours. And basically what happened was our trip kind of got broken up after the bid awards. One of the overnights was scheduled to be in New Orleans, which apparently is still kind of lacking the customer loads that we'd like going into New Orleans from Miami. So they canceled one of those flights, and they reassigned me to do a trip from Miami to Austin. However, long story short, there's no quick and easy way to get from Miami to Austin in the time that's required for me to get adequate rest in Austin. So they had to deadhead us through Dallas to get to Austin, with a couple of sits in between each flight.
Yeah.
So 2-hour sit in Miami, about an hour and a half sit in Dallas, coupled with, the 3-hour trip from Miami and the 45-minute trip to Austin, turned into a long deadhead day.
Yeah.
When me and the captain got to Austin, we looked at each other and we were just like, oh man, I feel like you can put a fork in me. I'm done,
Yeah. Wow. And did you fly that evening out of Austin, or you spent the night?
No, so we actually worked the flight from Atlanta. I failed to leave that. I left that out. We worked the flight from Atlanta to Miami in the morning.
Oh, okay.
Then sat the 2 hours, then Miami to Dallas, then Dallas to Austin,
and you spent the night
as a deadhead.
Yeah.
So, that was a brute of a day.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much all I've been doing. I did work a day trip yesterday just to Tampa, which was pretty much uneventful. Actually was eventful on the flight out of Tampa. Climbing out, we had let me see if I can pull up the message here, because I want to make sure I say it exactly correct for our listeners and our Airbus drivers. Hold on, I'm sorry. Give me a second. I'm looking for the picture so I get the right name. We had an ECAM message, flight control, flap system 2 fault on climb out. And those are one of those inhibited message.
Oh yeah.
As you take off. So once we got through, I guess was 1,000 feet or 800 feet, the message presented itself up there. And immediately, I've been practicing this all for 10 years now. My aircraft.
My radios.
My aircraft. And the captain went right into it. And he was like, oh, this is not a, quick action or an ECAM exception. I was like, right on, man. He's like, all right, why don't you keep flying and work the radios? Hey, sounds good. Just like in training.
Yep.
So my aircraft. And I said, all right, ECAM actions. And there was none. It just said, "Hey, this failed."
Just FYI.
And he's like, "Clear flight controls. All right, clear flight controls. All right, inoperative systems, flap slow," and I forget what else it said on there. And then, yep, clear status. Yep, clear status. Checking for follow-ups. No follow-ups. So
continue.
Off we continued. Yep. So
plan.
It worked out pretty good. It was really nice to, that was actually pretty much the first real, ECAM exercise we've had outside of training. So worked out pretty good.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, because that's, we go through this training, and every 6 months, 12 months, whatever your training cycle is, if you're flying for an airline, and you sit there in the sim and you do these things, and it's like second nature, because you've learned the flows and the trigger items, and you've gone through the profiles, and you've made the call outs, and then you get on the line and it's like, okay, whew, that's done. Now let's get back to the real flying, right? And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, months later, ding, and you're like, oh yeah. And it all like comes flooding back, and it's a good feeling when it's all successful.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So we've both been kind of enjoying their time off at home and flying.
Yep.
I've had some exciting events happen as well out on the flight line. As I mentioned, the QRH had a revision over at Legacy Airlines. Now, the QRH, what is that? That is the Quick Reference Handbook. Now, you mentioned that you had a procedure that came up. You had an ECAM message. ECAM is electronic crew alerting message, right? Or something like that?
ECAM? Electronic crew advisory messages.
Advisory messages,
or something like that,
messages, yeah. So
it's an acronym.
It's an acronym that, millions of acronyms. Just look up Captain Roger Victor, and he has a great acronym song that I hope he comes out with a revision and 2.0 on that, because there's so many more acronyms that he left out on that. But so you go through these actions. Now, after you're done with that, you look up for follow-up items, as you mentioned. The follow-up items are in a paper manual. Now, of course, we also have an electronic version on our EFB or electronic flight bag, but it's mandatory that each pilot carries this paper binder that has the Quick Reference Handbook. In the event that, for whatever reason, you don't have access to the electronic version, you always have a paper backup. So I had to update this because a revision came out, and I was doing most of my flying out of Ontario. So I had to figure out a way, either drive to LAX, go into the crew room, pick up a revision, or I could just trade a trip. And it kind of worked out with my schedule to just trade a trip. I hadn't been to Los Angeles in a while, so that's what I did. Now I'm sitting there in the crew room, and I'm doing this, inch thick packet of revisions. And you got to be careful with these, because you don't just, change the whole thing. You have to, old school, go through, look at the revision update list, find out which pages are replaced, which pages might be pulled out and destroyed, or which pages might be added to the list. And so you have to sit there and kind of go through each page and go through the revision, insert them. And then at the end, you want to keep that list of changes and review them, so that you're not just blindly putting in pages and not really knowing what changed. For the most part, they removed our one and only memory item on the Airbus completely. It's no longer a factor because of some software upgrades. So all references to the memory item was removed. And so
I'm sorry, I forgot. What was that? I don't even remember.
Oh, that's the 3 scenarios with the uncommanded pitch.
Okay.
Or
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so
the backup speed bus.
1 ADR on and 2 ADRs off.
I do.
Yeah.
See, that's how good my memory is on those memory items. I totally forgot about them.
You totally forgot them.
Because we got the revision. So
that's right. You're safe. So I did that, and I'm sitting there, and it takes about 10, 15 minutes to do. And it was kind of late at night. I'm just sitting there minding my own business, and I hear, "Hey, Tony, how you doing?" And I look up, and there's a captain who I recognized, but I had not flown with. And he goes, "It's Captain Keith. I've I've tagged you on Facebook a couple times. How's it going? How's the podcast going? I'm like, oh shit, hi, how are you? And so I was speaking a little bit with Captain Keith in the crew room. He is actually the creator of the Klezmer podcast. And we were talking about podcasting and how his podcast was going. He had not created a new show in a long time, and he said he was kind of motivated to get back into it. And his podcast, he interviews and plays music and news from the world of the Klezmer and Jewish music from around the world. And he has 134 episodes, and I'll put a link in the show notes for anyone that's interested in checking it out. But yeah, it was really nice to have someone recognize me and go, hey, how are you? I know you're from Facebook, and
that's awesome.
We're both podcasters. He's like, when are you coming over to our side? Because wide body operation is like a completely different bag, right?
Totally, yeah.
And I was like, I don't know, man. Maybe someday. He's like, yeah, come on over, man. I'd love to have you over on the 777.
Nice. That's awesome.
Like,
that's a good feeling, because that's kind of the same feeling I had a couple of weeks ago as I was departing out of Myrtle Beach, and I think I sent you a text message, and I don't even remember the captain's name. So I forgive me, Captain. I forget your name, but I said, hey, I ran into so and so. He recognized you and I from the podcast, and I think he either he's a listener or he actually was interviewed by you. But
very cool.
Anyway, yeah, that was kind of a caught me off guard. I'm like, wow, this is actually getting around, the podcasts and things like that. So, like, whatever you're doing,
a celebrity,
keep on doing
dude.
it, Tony. But hey, before we move on, I wanted to correct ourselves on this, because we want to make sure we're providing the right information to our listeners and showing them that we are dedicated professionals. The definition of ECAM is electronic centralized aircraft monitoring.
Oh,
I looked it up in our in our books, so I found it. But anyway,
I appreciate you doing that, because I was kind of bugged about that. I was like, how come I don't know what that stands for?
I know. Well,
electronic,
it's one of those acronyms where you use all the time. You know what it is, but the exact words may be irrelevant, because the use of it is more important on how you use it than what the actual name of it is. So
electronic centralized aircraft monitoring.
Electronic centralized aircraft monitoring. Yep. So
I bet you there are a lot of captains out there that probably don't even know
that. No, I doubt it. Yeah.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, like MCDU, we know what that is, but I bet you a lot of people don't really know what the whole word of that is.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yep.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, thanks for looking that up. That's fantastic. And
yeah, man.
The keeping it above 50%, to borrow a term from another podcast that I favorite.
That's right.
That's the way to go. Well, also on my time off, I mentioned that I went to my father's 75th birthday party. And so, you sit there, you make the rounds, you have fantastic food and cake and all that stuff, and you meet friends of that you don't know, that you didn't know, that my father's friends, and one of them, a musician for his church. He said, "Oh, you're a pilot. Well, let me ask you. I've been curious. Every time I get on a flight, there's all these little like antennas all over the airplane. I was wondering what those are." And I went, "Well, are they antennas, or what do they look like?" He goes, "They're long, and they're usually all over the wing and all over the body of the aircraft." And I'm thinking, maybe vortex generators. So I started asking him some questions. Do they look like little tiny fences that are a couple inches? And he's like, no, right. They're like really long, and they're like on the tail, and they're on the wing tips. And I'm like, oh, it sounds like you're talking about static dischargers. Now, a couple weeks ago, I posted on the social media sites for Squawk Ident some fantastic stills and video of St. Elmos Fire that I was able to capture flying out of Dallas a couple weeks ago.
That's awesome.
And so I was like, oh, what a coincidence that you're asking me about static dischargers. He's like, yeah, what do they do? Mm-hmm. And I thought,
Good question.
That's a great question. Let's talk about that on the next podcast. So, Rob, you know quite a bit about static discharge wicks, being a crew chief in the Air Force. And
yeah, I know that the airplane needs them. So when they're missing, we have to replace them.
Yeah, and they're not a no-go item most of the time. They're a CDL item, configuration deviation list. So you can just write it down that it's missing and go for I don't know how many cycles. But so static dischargers, commonly known as static wicks or static discharge wicks, are installed on the trailing edges of aircraft, included the electrically grounded ailerons, elevators, rudders, wings, horizontal and vertical stabilizer tips. Fitted on almost all civilian aircraft today, they are high electrical resistance, from 6 to 200 mega ohms for those technical listeners out there. Devices with a lower corona voltage than the surrounding aircraft structure. Okay, now we're talking like Latin here for me. They control the corona discharge of the atmosphere. They are used on aircraft to allow the continuous, satisfactory operation of onboard navigation and radio communication systems during precipitation static conditions. Precipitation static is an electrical charge on an airplane caused by flying through rain, snow, ice, or dust particles. When the aircraft charge is great enough, it discharges into the surrounding air. Without static dischargers, the charge would discharge in large batches through pointed aircraft extremities, such as antenna, wingtips, vertical and horizontal stabilizer, and other protrusions. The discharge creates a broadband radio noise frequency from DC to 1000 megahertz, which can affect aircraft communication. Static dischargers contain sharp points that any other part of the aircraft cause the charge to discharge through them instead, and do so gradually.
Yep. So basically, it's just a very fancy way to say that it provides a safe path for static electricity to exit the aircraft back into the atmosphere.
Right. So how does static electricity form on an aircraft? So we've talked a little bit about it here in this explanation from Wikipedia. I'll put a link in the show notes. But so you're traveling through the air, and all these dust particles, usually it's ice crystals, especially at elevation, close to thunderstorms, or even rain, and you have it. We always hear it on the radio. We hear that whiny sound on the radio. It's static that is not squelched out because of how much resistance and ohms, and there's just a lot of feedback there. And you hear it on the radio, and it's very annoying, and ATC is trying to talk to you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It sounds familiar.
Sounds about right. I should have made a recording of it next time it happened. And so these dischargers give the electricity or the electrical charge an avenue to escape without building up. Now, when the discharge cannot keep up with the actual static being introduced to the aircraft, we see the static electricity escape the aircraft, especially in the flight deck, right through the windshield, because it's obviously a metal aircraft, and as it's coming up, it hits the windshield. There's no metal. It's whatever it is, plexi composite,
Lexan or something.
Yeah,
like
Lexan,
that.
plastic
glass. Yeah.
So this electricity just sparks, and I'll actually upload a photo on the website of some of those St. Elmos Fire, because it was pretty cool to witness.
Yeah.
And that's what
your
it
airplane
does.
Getting charged up with static electricity right there.
Yeah. And sometimes it gets so bad you can actually smell the sulfur.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Burning ozone.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then working behind the scenes are your static wicks on your wingtips and tail and all the trailing edge devices. Those static wicks are discharging that built up static electricity back into the atmosphere. It's kind of like when you walk across the your room, and you're wearing socks, and you drag your feet across it, and you go touch the doorknob or something, and you get a little thunderbolt come out of your finger. The airplane's kind of doing the same thing, except it's not wearing socks. It's just flying through the air, and it's building up its static electricity. And you see static electricity in the sky all the time when you have a thunderstorm.
Yeah.
A lightning bolt is a discharge of static electricity that has been built up in a cloud. Everything has some kind of an electrical charge to it statically, positive or negative. And yeah, there you go. The cloud builds it up, and then at some point it says, I got to get rid of this thing. Where's the nearest negative waypoint here for me to get rid of this?
The path
and that's where you get a lightning bolt. And to the point of the very pointed portions of the static wick. You need that very pointy edge because it's very similar to like a lightning bolt hitting like a TV antenna or a tree. It looks for the highest and the pointiest part to discharge it at. And of course, if it can't find it, it's just going to do it into flat ground. Mm-hmm. But if it has something tall and prominent, then that's what it's going to hit. And that's basically how the static discharger kind of takes that place on an airplane.
Yep.
Instead of the antennas, instead of the radio navigate antennas and all that stuff, because we need those to operate. So we use these static wicks, and occasionally they do get burnt off or blown off, and then that's when we have to have them replaced because they did their job and they served their useful life, and they end up getting replaced. And I remember the ones that we used to use on the F-111 and F-16s, they were just screw-ons. So you just go grab a few from the maintenance supply shop there and unscrew the old one and screw back in the new one, and plane's good to go.
Yeah, all refreshed, renewed. Aircraft get struck by lightning. It happens all the time. We do our very best to avoid it, obviously, as aviators, but sometimes it's unavoidable. Now, what happens? Now, you're not touching the ground. You're in the air. So the lightning or the electrical charge passes through the aircraft. Right. I've heard of stories of these balls of electrical orbs going through from the front of the airplane to the back of the airplane as it's getting struck by lightning, and it just lights up the cabin at night. No one gets shocked because they're not grounded, so the electricity just kind of passes through the cabin usually. It's very rare that we actually see the physical effects inside the aircraft, but on the outside of the aircraft, if you have suspected that you were struck by lightning, you're supposed to do a walk around, log it in the maintenance log in the AML, and what maintenance comes out and does is an inspection of the aircraft, and what they're looking for are all the antennas and the static discharge wicks, and they're looking for frayed tips, trailing edge tips, and you can kind of tell almost right away, usually from the number 2 radio antenna, which is at the bottom of the fuselage, that you've been struck because you'll see burn marks. And Rob just sent me some photos of. Is this one of your? Wow,
that was a lightning strike I had as we were arriving into Puebla, Mexico. I forget how many years ago, at least 10 years ago, maybe even more. But yeah, we were descending about, looked like it was about 30 miles away from a major thunderstorm. And as we were descending through the light overcast layer of clouds, and it was actually almost so light that you could see through from above. You could see through this layer down to you could see the ground through the layer. That's how light the layer was. And as we descended through that layer, I heard and saw a flash and a pop, and I was like, man, I think we just got struck by lightning. And I looked at my first officer, my co-pilot, and was like, did you see that? And he's like, no, I honestly didn't hear or see anything. And I'm like, oh, maybe it was just me. Could have been. It happened so fast, and I didn't hear like a lightning strike or no thunder. There was nothing. I mean, the storm was far away. I mean, we're 30 miles away from it.
Yeah.
This was probably 15,000 feet or so as we were descending. into Pueblo. So, it was really odd to even experience a lightning strike at that altitude, or that, that from that distance from a thunderstorm. So anyway, I called the flight attendant and I said, "Hey, did you hear or see anything back there?" And she's like, "No, why?" I was like, "Oh, nothing. We're good. Your passengers all happy." Basically trying to get the sense of, if there's anybody looking out at the wing or anything like that.
Yeah.
Like, no, they're all look like they're kind of sleepy or, ready to get there. I'm like, okay, cool. So we landed, and first clue was when the first officer tried to communicate with the local station on radio number 2. Hey, we're on the ground. You got no response. So like, oh, okay, no big deal. That happens sometimes at these outstations. They're out on the ramp and they're not working the radios. So we pull in, and I'm like, well, you know what? I'm just going to go. I'm going to do the walk around while you shut down the airplane, since I think we got struck by lightning, but I'm not sure what it was. So as I did the walk around, that's when I saw those pictures, and you might want to post them on the website or whatever.
Will, yeah.
Those are pretty damn good ones.
Yeah.
But basically, it looks like that's where it entered. That's where the lightning struck, was that wingtip.
Mm-hmm.
Right, burned the structure right down to the honeycomb on the wingtip, and you could see the static wicks are all blown off. But also, I think another exit point was our number 2 comm radio antenna, which actually blew out our number 2 comm radio.
Yeah,
which we didn't realize. We didn't put all the pieces together until we departed back to Dallas. They just basically put some speed tape over the wing first of all.
Put some tape
called
on
it good.
Put some Windex on it. You're fine.
For Dallas, and then when we were trying to transmit an in-range call on our number 2 comm with DFW, because we needed a couple extra wheelchairs, we couldn't read anybody. And then so I asked ATC if we could try test the radio with their help. So we tested our number 2 radio, and they couldn't hear anything. So that's when we reported that. Of course, number 2 radio was fried. So
yeah,
here we are.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing those pictures. I'll put them up on the website as well. I've been struck a couple times myself, and what I found interesting, I had maintenance show me the evidence, because I couldn't really see much evidence. I knew we were hit because it was a big flash of light. It hit right underneath the first officer's window, actually.
Yeah. Really.
But he showed me it's like a sewing needle, and the heat from the electrical discharge as it's going in and out of the skin of the aircraft makes these little burn holes. And so you look and you see these little tiny holes that are just random, and they usually have little scorch marks around them. And that's where the electricity is going in and out of the fuselage skin until it reaches either a static discharge wick or a pointy tip towards the tail of the aircraft.
Yeah, if you look at those pictures, you can see there's a couple of those on the wing tip picture.
Yeah.
The left wing tip, you can see them on there. But the most impressive one that is the one that I sent you is the image of the upper surface of the wingtip. Yeah. I mean, that thing is just scorched, but that's where
it looks like it's burned in a fire. It really is impressive to see. Speaking of burning, last week actually, we did a red eye from Los Angeles to Charlotte. I mentioned that I was doing revisions in the crew room before that trip, and halfway across the country, we get ding, 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 fire, lav smoke.
Oh, yeah.
And so we got the ECAM message, the electronic, what was it? Electronic,
but we're
centralized,
know at the end of the show ourselves.
Centralized,
that is
automated messaging system.
Electronic centralized aircraft monitoring
system. Okay, yeah. So we got the ECAM message, and we both stopped and looked at each other like, oh crap. And captain said, my aircraft, my radios. He goes, well, let's see. I think it's somebody just smoking in the lav. And he goes, but let's run through it. Is it a quick action or ECAM exception? I don't think it was.
I think that's only on the ground.
It's only on the ground. Yeah. So it was.
Yeah.
It wasn't. I looked at it. It wasn't. And he goes, okay, let's call him up. So he calls this all call in the cabin, and of course it went out right away. The smoke message, and the number one goes, yeah, someone I think is vaping in the lab. We can smell it. And he's like, okay, well, get him out of there. Let's see, see what they say. So just as soon as he hangs up to go back there to check, ding, 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 lab smoke again.
Oh boy.
So it immediately gets extinguished, and he comes back and says, yeah, there was a guy vaping in the lab. He came out with the vape pen in his hand, and then when I checked the lab, there was a vape pen in the trash can. So he was doing some major vaping.
Oh, nice.
So the captain's like, all right, well, give me his seat number and name. We got to file a report now. And sure enough, we verified that information in the aircraft operations manual and in the operations manual for the company. Any passenger disturbance now of any kind and any smoking of any kind or vaping of any kind is an immediate report to the company. And our captain said, well, let's just have law enforcement standing by with the ground security coordinator and see what they want to do with it, because he is in violation of a federal law as smoking in the bathroom. Yes, vaping counts. Electronic cigarettes count. Everything counts. Those
says
vape
it in
pens,
all the placards and literatures that we have on the airplane. I know people don't read them.
Yeah, it's there.
It says it in black and white.
Yeah, and vaping is actually pretty serious because those pens can overheat and catch fire, and it's basically a thermal runaway of a battery, of a lithium-ion battery. So, yeah, the CSR met the passenger in question at the gate, and they were having a conversation with law enforcement standing by. I don't know what happened to them, if they got in trouble for that, but hey, if you're gonna vape on an airplane, if you can't go an entire flight without, smoking a drag, as they say in England,
take the bus.
yeah, take the train, and you can step outside, open a window or something. We're also excited because warm crew meals are back.
Oh yeah,
October 1st at Legacy Airlines. I made the mistake of eating one.
Thank God Roger's not on this episode, because he would be really rolling his eyes at us right now.
Yeah. Meanwhile, he's like having, catering
filet
delivered.
mignon.
Yeah.
Caviar.
Yeah. Have you partaken in the warm meals yet with all the flying?
Yeah, actually, I have. It was I knew it was coming back this month, but I wasn't expecting it on my first trip. And when the flight attendant told us, hey, we're ready for your breakfast, I'm like, sure. I'm expecting the cereal and the cold stuff with the banana and more cheese.
Yeah, cheese and grapes.
She's like, yeah, we got an omelet, and we have and then there was another, like, a bagel, everything bagel or something like that.
Nice.
And I'm like, oh, omelet. Is that? And then I'm thinking, is it going to be cold? Yeah. She's like, no, we're heating it up. You got warm meals back. I'm like, oh, cool. So, the captain's like, hey, you get to choose. Like most captains are pretty gracious that way. So like, all right, I'll have the omelet. And I got to tell you, for the first 3 or 4 bites, it was nice because it's like, oh, we got warm meals back. But then, immediately my taste buds went back to, over a year ago. I was like, oh, it's the same stuff again.
Yep.
It's good, but it's like, oh man, I can only eat maybe one of these a week. And
yep,
I'm good. So yeah, what'd you have? I had breakfast. I had lunch.
I haven't had the breakfast,
like the roast.
Yeah, I had the roast, which I felt ill for. It didn't feel good after.
No.
And I've had the pasta.
Right?
Yeah, the pasta is, you can't give heated up pasta from the back of an airplane to an Italian guy, because I'm like,
I know.
Che schifo. Questa merda. This is shit.
Yeah, I get it.
But
yeah, but it's nice to get back. It's certainly helping out. At least in my eyes. Yeah, I don't mind it. I eat it whenever I'm hungry. And then I'll supplement that meal with something else if I know it's coming, and I'm not gonna don't have the palate for it that day, so I'll go get a salad or another sandwich. So, but yeah, it's kind of nice to have them back, though.
Yeah, it is. It is, and I was very appreciative, and I made sure that I let my flight attendant know that passed up the meals. Thank you so much for heating this up and preparing it for us. We are very grateful for what you do, and they really, that little bit helps tremendously to just give your gratitude to your coworkers and even the person next to you. I've been doing a lot of that lately, and some of the captains have been kind of smiling at me, saying, your brown nosing is getting really professional. I said, no, sir. It's called daily affirmation, and I just want to let you know you're good enough, you're smart enough, and doggone it, people like you.
People like me. I like what Colonel Furman said last week. He's like, man, I just feel like I'm getting away with something right now. So, but no, in all seriousness, I've actually had a couple times too where, they'll say, hey, we got meals for you. And the captain he's like, oh, I'm not going to eat. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to eat it anyways. Are you guys hungry? Why don't you guys go ahead and, eat it yourself? And, half the time they're like, oh, yes. Yeah. So now they get to eat, because I don't even know if they get meals.
They really don't.
On trips.
They don't.
Yeah.
They have.
That's sad. Yeah. So I think they usually eat the leftover first class meals or
snack assortment.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sucks. That's something that needs to be worked out. Those crew members in the back, they really, really work hard back there, and they deserve to have all the best to keep them going. So
yeah. And I appreciate too when the captain's doing the pre-flight briefing with the flight attendants, and they insist that they all gather up front so that it's not like lost through translation, because you tell the purser, and then the other 3 flight attendants are like, well, I never knew it was going to be bumpy. It's like, well,
right,
that's the way it's supposed to work. And I like it when they actually take a moment, they tell the gate agent, nope, don't board yet, I have to do my pre-flight briefing, everybody come up, let's do a pre-flight briefing. And the captain will do a very brief briefing. I don't like it when they sit there for 20 minutes and tell you their life story, but they do a nice briefing. And then the greatest thing I heard lately was, and I know you guys are wearing your mask the whole time, but if you would like to come up mid-flight for a few minutes, take your mask down, take a fresh air. And that is actually fantastic when I hear them say that. Well, lately, a lot of the buzz on the flight deck was what has been happening over at what we call, well, let's just say Southwest Airlines, because it's a news article here we're going to be talking about from the Points Guy. Southwest Airlines recently has canceled many flights, and there's been a lot of speculation that it is some kind of job action. And the truth is that there's no evidence whatsoever that it is any kind of job action. As a matter of fact, from some of our friends that actually are employed over there at that carrier, they have confirmed that the month of October had no more sick out time or pilots calling in sick than any of the previous 2 months. So there is no evidence that there's job action. What there is evidence of, as is described in an article that we'll be talking about here in a moment from the Points Guy, is just a collection of weather, air traffic control delays, and en route issues, and mismanagement of flights, schedules, and crew scheduling. So this perfect combination has created quite a stir over at Southwest. Have you been hearing the same thing, Rob?
I have. Yeah, I have. They looks like they had kind of the perfect storm to speak of in their weekend meltdown, where kind of weather, air traffic control, not being able to safely get traffic through their airspace properly because of the storms, and just the way that Southwest routes their aircraft and their crews through the system. They experienced just a total meltdown, because a lot of people don't realize that, if there's weather in Florida and you're in Denver, why would that weather in Florida affect you in Denver? Well, guess what? Airplanes travel across the country, and it may end up in Denver at some point, and that crew may need to fly you out of Denver. Well, guess what? They're stuck in Florida with that airplane, with that crew. So yes, you are going to be affected in Denver or Omaha or anywhere in the country. That's kind of what happened. There was no buffer in their scheduling for any kind of cancellation or delays.
Yeah, they didn't have the overlap
and have any
aircraft
overlap.
and flights. Yeah,
and they're running thin.
Yeah,
with personnel and crews.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about what I think happened here, and I think you agree with me from what you're saying. But the article goes on to say Southwest canceled more than 1,800 flights over the weekend. That number has actually grown since this article came out, causing a cascading effect of chaos throughout its network and leaving thousands of passengers stranded around the U.S. and Central America. Many more flights were delayed and problems continued into Monday. Now, Southwest initially said on Saturday that the delays were caused by a combination of bad weather in Florida and air traffic control delays. The Federal Aviation Administration, which manages air traffic control, said that it did not have any active delays causing confusion. Southwest later clarified that it was referring to after effects from Friday night delays. So there's a lot of he said, she said, pointing the fingers, passing the buck kind of thing. Sources both at Southwest and air traffic control denied to the TPG that there was a walkout or other labor action, despite some employees vocally opposing the ban and threatening job actions. Airline workers' strikes are prohibited under the Railway Labor Act. So you can't strike. Now, if you have a job action and a union or other organization says, yeah, everybody call out sick or don't show up to work tomorrow, that's actually illegal as well.
Yes, totally.
So it's extremely, hard to prove when those kind of actions happen. But now everything is traced online, digitally. So even if somebody puts on a Facebook page, hey, tomorrow we're going to call out sick. I mean, it's so easy to trace. And there's been no evidence of this. What we're seeing is, and as you were kind of mentioning earlier, Rob, was some airlines do maybe 5 or 6 flights on a particular aircraft with different crews every single time, swapping aircraft. I know Legacy does that. There is a logic and a reason to it. Southwest often finds their schedules where that crew will fly that aircraft for 2 or 3 legs in the same day with 20-minute turns in between. So once that first domino falls, it creates an effect where a bunch of dominoes fall. And that, I think, is the causation of the logistics that created these cancellations and delays. So I really think that it was just this combination of some air traffic issues, some delay issues, crews being out of place. You mentioned you had to do a double deadhead this week just in order to get into location so that you can fly out a leg in the morning, which was exhausting. Well, that's what a majority, I believe the article goes on to say, what's 6% or more of the crews were out of place, which is huge.
Yeah. And something I failed to mention in my deadhead story, which parlays back into the Southwest story, is I almost ran out of duty day just deadheading. We had a 12-hour duty day since we were traveling to a working sequence. It's considered part of our duty day. So we were limited to 12 hours of duty day. And we landed with literally 2 minutes left of our duty day. Now, bring that back to the Southwest story. All those crew members are under the same kind of regulations that we're under, where they are federally mandated limited to their, not only flying time, but also their amount of hours they can work in a day. So once they reach those limits or approach those limits, they turn into pumpkins. Meaning they can't work those trips anymore. So when you run into delays, you're on a clock as a crew member to be useful to the company. And once you reach that limitation, then you're no longer useful, and then the company has to come up with an alternative plan to crew those flights. And sometimes that alternative plan results in a cancellation. And we've mentioned it before. sometimes the cancellations are meant to just reset the system, come back the next day. Everybody gets their the required rest, and you stay with an airplane that's been canceled in that domicile or that outstation, and then you start off the next day with that airplane and that domicile, and pick up where you left off.
Yeah, I think there's a point of where you run so efficient that, like we mentioned, the minute you throw a wrench in the system, there is a diminishing returns that are just not viable, and I think that's what we're really seeing here. So it's really kind of a moot point.
And I think part of the, not to extend this on too much longer or anything like that, but part of, I think, some of the media's agendas was to take this back to the hot topic of the airlines and a lot of federal agencies is the whether or not to have a shot, to get a COVID shot. So a lot of people think that the sick out was the so-called the alleged sick out was a result of the workers, standing their ground and saying we're not going to get one. I don't believe it's the case. I talked to my buddies that work for Southwest. I hang out with a number of them here in Dallas, and they're like, no, it was just the way that the whole system worked that week with weather and delays, and it just snowballed into a train wreck, which let's face it, you and I at Legacy have experienced that quite a bit this past summer, especially when storms impact all of our hubs, Dallas, Chicago, Charlotte, Miami, almost all at the same time. And we almost grind to a stop at some point during those occasions, and it's very frustrating for our travelers and crew members, but that's what happens.
Yep, absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that and talk to our featured guest today right after the break. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from the break. Well, our next guest first joined us on Flight 74 of the Squawk Ident podcast, entitled A Warrior and a Pilot. She's a Gold SEAL CFI and aircraft owner and president of the Arrow Valley Flying Club, president and co-founder of the nonprofit Lantana Cares, co-host to the hit YouTube channel Taking Off, a new homeowner, and most recently, a newly minted line pilot at SandPiper Air. From her new abode in Denton, Texas, help us in welcoming to the show, Miss Christy Wong. Christy, how you doing?
Doing pretty great today, actually. Thank you. I apologize if it's echoey in here. We still haven't been able to put up any METAR maps, sectional.
Stuff to make it homely. That's awesome.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a wooden prop up there somewhere above the sofa soon.
Oh, there actually is in the corner over there.
Cool. Fantastic. And congratulations. The last time we had a chance to speak with you was back in March of 2001. And a lot has happened along your journey in aviation. What can you tell us about what's been going on this past year?
Okay. Well, do you want me to start with personal or professional updates?
Well, let's start with the
transition. I'll just say that.
Yeah. Let's stick to the professional, and we'll dive into the personal when you're least expecting it.
Okay. Well, professionally, I was recalled back to the airline. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to go to Oshkosh this year because my training actually started during the week of Oshkosh. However, I'm not upset about it because I was able to get back on the 175, and I was able to get based out of DFW, which made it even better. I know, no commuting. I think I told you guys last year I was based in Chicago, but I never had to go because we never got to fly the airplane. Yeah. Well, this year I not only got based in DFW, but I've been flying the airplane. I went through IOE and passed, no problems. I've had a really great time, and I got to do my very first line pilot flying, and it was 2 ferry flights.
Oh, fantastic. We've been following your journey on social media, and we're just so very proud of you to be going through that. And we all have a stake in SandPiper, Rob being a former 175 check airman himself. We love that company and just think that it's fantastic. And we're so happy for you. Now, you mentioned a little of the personal changes. We mentioned that you have a new house. And we actually had a chance to talk after the last podcast you and I were on, because you had invited me out. I had recurrent training the following month, and it was an amazing experience to hop into the Wong Warrior with you and go flying around Denton, Texas. And I had not been in a normally aspirated piston-powered aircraft for, I think we calculated it to like 14 years. And
yeah.
It was amazing. We had so much fun. We talked a little bit about our experience on a podcast that we did afterwards, but thank you again so much for taking me up. And it was fantastic to see your home airport and meet Kevin and get to talk to one of your students. And, man, what a treat.
Yeah. We had so much fun that night. I go back and I remember the coyotes on the runway.
Oh, that's right. Were you guys talking about that?
I remember, coaching you through landings, and we flew all over the place. We did this beautiful scenic flight out over the lake. It was coming towards sunset. The weather had moved off. So the sky was just probably 16 different colors. It was such a fantastic experience to go and fly with you that day.
Yeah, and no traffic in the pattern. We were doing impossible turns, which are not so impossible.
Yeah, and that's one really great thing about the controllers is they know that I love staying proficient. So they'll be like, "Hey, 5-1 whiskey, nobody's in the pattern. Do you want to do some whatevers?" And they'll give me a whole bunch of crazy instructions, and I have to follow it. And it's a skill set building exercise for me as much as it is a game for them.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. And so you talked a little bit about, or hinted to, some professional or some personal changes in your life. What changes are you willing to share?
Okay. Previously, earlier in the year, I wasn't really ready to talk about it, but things have improved. And so, Steve and I, a lot of people know that Steve Wong and I, we were married. We did get divorced. And so, it's funny how you read about these celebrity marriages falling apart, and they always cite irreconcilable differences. And honestly, that's truly what happened. Steve is not a bad guy, and I'm not a bad person either. We got down to a point where we just could no longer reconcile certain big aspects of our lives. And so we made a mutual decision, a very hard decision, to end our marriage. And, it was really, it was really heartbreaking, honestly. We both kind of flip-flopped a little bit on it. It actually started really and truly, that conversation started early last year, but we sort of tabled it because I was going through training. And then of course we went through COVID and stuff. And so we ultimately, we decided to try to make our marriage work. And when we realized it wasn't going to work, it just, unfortunately, people grow and change. And it's a really hard decision to make when you're growing and changing with somebody who turns into a particular person that you don't necessarily see yourself being with anymore, at least in that capacity. The one thing we did agree on was we agreed to be friends. We've got our 9-year-old son, Mitchell, as well as our daughter, Emily, who's grown and in Las Vegas now. She's doing the adulting thing, but Mitchell and Emily, they are, before Steve and I don't know, we wanted to make it work for them, initially. And when we realized our marriage wasn't going to work, we decided to work on a friendship. So Steve and I agreed weekly family dinners. we get together for holidays. I'll be with them for trick or treating. We'll be together for Christmas. We'll figure something out. We haven't talked about Thanksgiving yet, but he and I agreed, we're still family, and it's just this is our new family dynamic. Yeah. And we implore others to do that as well, because we want to make sure that Mitchell continues to grow and thrive. We don't want him to get swept in the way of our, we're not even angry at each other. That's not even a good way to put it. We didn't want him to be adversely affected. We agreed we wanted Mitchell to have the best of both worlds.
Sure. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. And it's a very mature and a very honorable way of going about it. I know in a few conversations that we've had, you're in good company. There's so many aviators out there that struggle with relationships and the interpersonal dynamics at home. And it's such a healthy and refreshing thing to hear that you're working on your friendship. That,
yeah.
The key word being working. It's something that you just have to keep working on it, because you have that bond and you have that history together. And in the process of going through initial training again, and having all these outside stresses bombarding your life, all of our lives really, with COVID and with the stress of the economy and mask wearing and mask phobia and all this stuff that's going on, and you're still having to deal with your personal life. Thank you for sharing that, because it's a very refreshing and healthy thing to hear that aviators are much more than just these stellar stoic figures in the cockpit that never get stressed out and are always doing the right thing. And the truth is, we're people, and we have lives, and we have a lot to deal with, and a lot of personal things outside of aviation. And it's important, in order to make the best judgment out on the flight line, to have a good separation of home and work, but also try to balance the health of it all, because it all affects each other. And it's really good to hear. And in the process, you've been very vocal about moving into your own new place, and we're so happy for you.
Yeah, so that's kind of the next segment of this. So, I at the beginning of this year, when Steve and I separated and decided to get divorced, I was like, you know what? I'm going to buy my own place then. I didn't want to be, I didn't want to live in an apartment. I didn't want to rent a house. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to find a place. So I found this lovely little subdivision of townhomes in Denton, and they were new construction. So I went and checked it out, and I said, you know what? I'm going to do it. Well, a lot of people already know who Kevin is. Kevin has been my best friend for like 3.5 years. The dude literally walked into my hangar one day to inquire about the flying club. And we became really close friends. I mean, this was back when I was a private pilot. So, he would kind of help me along the way. I'd reach out to him for questions. Both him and Marcus were really instrumental in my growth and moving toward SandPiper Airlines. There was actually a crossroads that I came to previously where I had a choice to make. Do I go to SandPiper or do I go to another carrier? And both of them had gone to SandPiper. And so that's, they were able to give me some insider info and tell me all the great things about the company. And that's ultimately why I decided to go. Well, he and I have just stayed close ever since. We, over the last couple of years, developed a really close bond. And so when Steve and I split up, we decided to take the leap. Initially, I said no, poor guy, because I was, going through my own changes, but I finally said yes. And we decided to, start dating. And we realized very quickly that we had this really crazy, I don't know how else to describe it other than just life partner CRM.
Yeah.
Really, really connect with somebody on 95% of all levels. And so, he told me, he was like, hey, you want me to move in, I would move in, and help pay rent and this and that. And I was like, okay. And then the more we started talking about it, I was like, I'm not going to do that. If you're going to do that, why don't we just go into it as a financial partnership, And so we started talking about that. And then we were like, dude, this is stupid. Like, we are so good together. Let's just go in on this house together. So we actually bought the house together. And we've been together ever since. And it's
go for it, Kevin.
It's definitely grown our relationship. I don't know. It's been really great though. Dude, he's an incredible, amazing person. He's an incredible pilot. You've met Kevin.
Yeah.
He's just so thoughtful of me and pretty much everybody around. I could not imagine where I'd be right now if it weren't for him. He's just been so great, Yeah. And I kind of look at it, through the turmoil and tragedy that I went through this last year, because it was a personal tragedy.
For sure.
I'm finding new ways to grow and thrive. And so I'm actually a lot happier than I was a couple of years ago. And that I didn't think I would be. I didn't think I could ever be this happy again.
Yeah. And I know it's crossed your mind. At what point does Kevin upgrade and then you can sling gear for him?
Actually talked about it. In fact, he heard I'll let Kevin, when are you going to upgrade at SandPiper Airlines?
Yeah. I could right now if I wanted to, but that quality of life as a FO is pretty good. So I don't know, maybe within the next year or so.
Oh, okay. Well, congrats.
I definitely like to.
Yeah, congratulations on that, because when that moment comes, we're telling Christy she's going to have to call you captain.
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually talked about, though, we were like, how great would that be? Like, when I finally get some seniority as an FO and you have seen, a little bit of seniority as a captain, we're going to be able to buddy bid. I mean, that's going to be amazing.
Yeah, we've seen quite a few couples like that in our time over there. It's pretty neat to see that dynamic where, the husband and wife or boyfriend and girlfriend were able to bid on these trips. And here I am being like really junior. I'm like, how do they do that? How do you bid like that? How do you even get awarded that? But they're just both really senior on both sides of the cockpit, and they were able to do that. And it was really neat.
Yeah. I got to see that many years ago. I was flying with the captain out of Chicago, and his wife was the flight attendant. And we would always kind of bid the same schedule. We were doing, I don't know if you're doing hardline bidding still, but we were doing hardline bidding. And after like the third month of all three of us flying together, we all got along so great. He's like, hey, are you buddy bidding me? I'm like, I don't even know how to do that, but okay. And we ended up probably in our careers flying at the time, both at SandPiper, that captain and I and his wife flew together probably 8 months in total together.
Wow.
And it was great because we check into the layover hotels. They take one room and they're like, all right, Tony, you get to pick which room you want, or take them both. We don't care. So yeah, if you get that opportunity, it's kind of cool experience to do, while you can. Yeah.
That's a life thing that would just be incredible. Like I couldn't describe it, just because I try to spend as much time with her as I can, and to be able to work with her would just be amazing. I mean, it would literally be like.
Okay, so we're going to talk personal. I know you guys talked about it a little bit earlier about the COVID issue, but I'm just going to put this out there. We both actually got COVID in July, early July. And this is when I realized that we had something really great. Honestly, we got quarantined together for 2 weeks, like literally did not leave the apartment. We were stuck in a, 700 square foot apartment together for 2 weeks straight. And it was amazing. Like
we had so much fun.
Like
COVID ain't so bad, right?
Well,
but it was. I was never like.
I'm gonna kill him. Or I'm so bored with him. I'm gonna kill him. Like we found, and I think the key to that success was we were looking for ways to like entertain each other. Like I didn't want him to be bored. He didn't want me to be bored. So there was always this mutual respect of, all right, let me do something for you. You do something for me or whatever. And it actually turned out to be a really great bonding experience for us.
It was.
You really get to know someone too, right?
Bonus, got the antibodies against COVID. So there you go.
There you go. Yeah.
Sweet.
Well, so what we really wanted to, I know you're kind of limited on time because today's kind of a big day also over at SandPiper. You're going to do your base day. And we'll we'll get to that here in a second. But how was your training? You had already gone through training. Did you have to do another long term?
Yes.
Yeah. And
it was basically, and here's the deal. They actually, what I really, really enjoyed about that program is that it was the same, but different. It was the same in that, I was back on the 175. I was learning all the same things. I was learning how the flaps flap and how the gears. But they had actually restructured a lot of the training based on feedback previously given.
Oh, okay.
So one of the big complaints we had last year, and I know prior classes had complained, was the fact that there was very little work on like the FMS before going into the trainers, the instrument procedure trainers or the computer procedure trainers. And so you go in there like having read about how to program the FMS, but really no dexterity toward it. Yeah. They actually created an FMS day. So now you get a whole day just programming the FMS.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
Yeah. No, that was super helpful.
Yeah.
They restructured some other things as well, but that to me was really, that showed me that they listened to the feedback, which is really great. And I think a lot of people tend to take that aspect for granted, is that, it may not have been perfect when, you went back through training, but we listened to your feedback and we implemented those changes,
Nice.
So it was going back and relearning all the stuff that I had honestly forgotten. Kevin and Marcus were really great too. They helped me study. They kind of got me back into the groove of things. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there's IOE, which is where you're flying with somebody like Rob, and when you were with them, oh man, I just think how great would that have been if you were still here, man? We would have a blast.
That would be fun.
But yeah,
I'd show you how to do it, how not to do it the right way or the wrong way.
Yeah. But yeah, so it was crazy, you guys. I have so many cool stories to tell from my IOE experiences. So literally first flights, I had APA numbers because we had an MEL on the aircraft.
Nice.
We had delays, weather, reroutes. I mean, it was, I joked with my check airmen that I got quality IOE because I felt like everything was being thrown at us. We had the next day, we had maintenance. It was just crazy. And then, so second day, I'm literally my fourth landing in the airplane. We land in DFW. I'm getting off the airplane. Guess who's sitting in first class?
Eddie's probably got the critique paperwork.
Yep.
Okay.
No pressure.
Let's see. That landing was super hard and long, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I'll let you tell that story. That was messed up, man.
She was just doing
Huntsville.
She was doing a 2-day trip, and she was doing 6 flights, and she was doing a Huntsville turn to end the trip. And me and a buddy of mine, who is also friends with Christy, were like, the flights are wide open both ways. We should sneak on and just ride along. And so that's what we did. And it was actually funny because I was actually getting back from a trip at almost the same exact time. So I had to land, and I was coming from Mexico. So I had to go run through customs, run over to the Bravo terminal, and
without me seeing him.
Yeah. And then we were hiding and stuff. And they gave us the seats right next to the cockpit. So she came out of the cockpit when we were on the ground to use the bathroom. We were hiding behind the seat, and it was
See, Lesson learned. You got to check the non-rev list right before you close the door, just in case you have somebody back there that you may know.
No way. I don't know how to do that. Yeah.
There you go. That's the next lesson.
Yeah, Kevin will show you. It's on CCI.
The flight attendant came and like blocked the door at one point. She was like, "Hey, girl." I was like, "Hey."
I didn't want her while I was there. I didn't want to be a distraction or anything like that. You know, it's a big day. You got a lot going on. I didn't want her to be nervous or anything that I was there, because I've had her ride along with me, and at the time I had a lot of time in the airplane, and even then I was still a little nervous. But
yeah,
I just wanted to be.
That's a good nervous. You want to make it perfect,
and that's something that you'll take with you to your last day, is the fact that you were there together, and yeah, those are some fantastic memories to hang on to.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah, and so you mentioned that you were drinking from the fire hose, as everyone does on IOE. Most people, we tell them they're hanging on by the rudder for their first 2 legs, and it takes a while for them to crawl back into the flight deck and get maybe ahead of the airplane by a step or two. And, you know, you really drank from the fire hose, and you were mentioning that quality IOE. And Rob and I have had this discussion many times. We would always rather have a new hire or a student that struggled a little bit, but had the book thrown at them and they still could get through it, rather than somebody that had absolutely nothing go wrong, everything was perfect, and they did fantastic. Because it's not until you put a little bit of pressure on that you realize what your own personal limitations are, and if you can always redirect to get back into the green, to borrow a term from the threat and error management model.
So my second trip, so that the first trip was just a 2-day trip, right? And I wound up getting like 10 hours out of that trip. So I was halfway done. The second trip was a 4-day trip. And in fact, he had actually said, you should request going through Chicago. And I was like, oh, okay. But then I forgot about it. We were busy moving and stuff. Well, guess what? I got 2 Chicagos on my second trip. I was like, wow, look at this. I didn't even have to ask, you know. The second trip, we had maintenance, weather, flying at night, like through the weather, trying to get through that. Chicago turns twice in one day. I mean, it was just, like I said, it was an incredible experience. And the second check airman said the same thing. He's like, wow, like, yeah, you're getting some quality IOE. This is good stuff. That what was it? No, the third day we had 4 legs and I flew 3 of them, you know?
Good.
And then, I mean, just, I'm thinking of all the incredible things that got thrown at me. And I'm actually really proud of myself because, man, I was hanging on and I didn't feel nervous. Once I got into it, it was like, all right, here we go. And I just did the thing, you know?
Yeah. And I think you have, as you mentioned, a very good support structure. I
do.
And that makes all the difference in the world. And my only advice to a listener that, you know, might have a job interview coming up over at SandPiper, you know who you are. And once you get in there, it's make the friends in your new hire class. You know, find somebody that looks like they like to study with them. Because, you know, we used to tell us, throw a tennis ball against the wall of the hotel room. And if you can read off the call outs while bouncing the tennis ball, you're fine. But if you can't multitask and bounce the ball, catch it, and read the call outs for the checklist or read the call outs for the flow, then you don't know it well enough yet. So there's so many little techniques that you can pick up studying with a partner, having somebody that's already in the industry or in that airline on that equipment that can help navigate you when you have a question is crucial. And then what Kyle would tell you right now is take advantage of the mentor program. Every single airline has a mentor program associated either with the airline or with the pilot union that they have set up, and take advantage of it. Make those phone calls, because even if you think you've got it, it's just so helpful to have that tool in your arsenal to make a phone call or send an email or text out saying, hey, I got a question about this.
I will say what really eased my mind, I think the most, was that when the check airmen called me, they reached out to me before we flew. Do you have any questions? This is what it's going to be like, welcome back. I mean, they spent probably 10 minutes on the phone with me, just going over, little things, just chatting for a few minutes. And then of course I got to know them during our trips a little bit better, but it really helped put my mind at ease. Just talking to them. I will admit, I was really nervous before that first IOE flight until he reached out to me. And then all of a sudden it was like calm.
Yeah.
I can't describe that. That is huge.
Yeah. And it's something that Rob and I used to do before every single trip with even with a captain upgrade. It didn't matter. You had IOE with somebody. It wasn't obligation to call them. And a lot of check airmen kind of reneged on that obligation. They would just say, well, I'll see you at the gate, and at the hotel layover, they'll like, okay, see you tomorrow at van time. It's like, well, answer some questions, spend some time, go over stuff that's not flying related that might be helpful to this person who might not know about van times and hotels. And I had one IOE student who at noon, I saw them in uniform in the lobby of the hotel, and our van time was like 4 p.m. And I came down and I just come in from a run, and I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, well, checkout is at noon.
No.
And I was like, bro, you're an airline pilot, Brian. That doesn't count. Did you turn in your key? Come on, let's go get your key. Yeah. Let's get you back in your room. Go watch a movie.
Some people don't know.
Didn't know. Nobody told them. No one spent the time to kind of walk them through this idiosyncrasy of a process that they had no idea. So, it's extremely important for people like that.
I had a student that I got a call from cruise scheduling. I think we started IOE in New York. Yeah, it was New York. And I got a call from cruise scheduling, and they're like, yeah, can you meet your first officer at security? Because he has no clue where to go.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, sounds good. So
I was saying navigating employee parking, even at just at DFW, you're like, what am I doing? Where am I going? I have no clue where to go.
Yeah.
I lost my car in the parking lot first day, first trip.
Oh.
Because I didn't realize there were 3 stops. So when I pulled into the parking lot, and this was back when the bus was in a reverse order. So anyway, when I pulled into the parking lot, which you come in at the last stop, technically, it's hard to explain, but I parked my car at the first stop, and then got on the bus, went to work. 6 days later, come back, and I got off at the first stop on the bus, which is coming in the opposite direction, which I had no clue about. So I got off at the first stop, went to the area where I thought I parked my car, and I'm like, hey, I wasn't driving a BMW. Whose car is that? Why is it in my parking spot? Did they tow mine? Oh my gosh. And thankfully some flight attendant saw the bewildered look on my face, and she was like, hey, are you new? Did you park at the other bus stop? I was like, yes, can you give me a ride? She's like, yeah, sure. So she gave me a ride, and there was my car.
Leave it to Rob.
Crazy.
So your IOE experience, Christy, was fantastic, and you even had Kevin ride along with you, which was an amazing memory to have. Is there any part of the training, maybe learning a particular system, that really had you kind of hitting the books a little harder than you thought you would have to?
Honestly, the FMS and the FMA, the flight mode enunciator, understanding when you hit this, it's not just about, okay, I hit this button now. When I hit this button, why do I hit this button? Why does it go into this mode? Stuff like that. That's what I'm telling all of my friends who are now going into SandPiper. I've got 4 mentees underneath me that I'm trying to give, little tidbits to along the way. Hey guys, here's what to expect. These are the things to focus on. Because the 175 is an awesome airplane, and it's got this wonderful VNAV capability, but you have to know how to manage it correctly.
Definitely. Speed on thrust, speed on elevator.
Exactly.
Yep.
And you're like, but it's starting to make sense now. Like it actually has started to make sense, when I actually started flying the airplane, and even when I was in the sim. But the sim training, it's that AQP training. Now we're out there flying the line. But yeah, my first, I'm sitting on standby because I'm bottom of the bottom, and that's just what happens. You sit standby. I call it airport appreciation.
Yeah.
I'm having a really great time doing it because I'm meeting new people. I'm learning new things while I'm sitting there waiting for that phone call. And the first day I didn't get called. So no flying. The second day I got called within the first 45 minutes. Deadhead, ferry flight. And, so I was like, I remember doing this in training because there's stuff that you have to do for ferry flights. You're either ferrying them to maintenance or you're repositioning them, but you have to do this like manual weight and balance. And I was like, oh God, like I just got used to flying the airplane like normally. Now I've got through and what was amazing is you're taking off and the airplane is super light.
Oh yeah.
Max power out. It was just an incredible.
Yeah. TO1 takeoff. Yep.
TO1 max, dude. Diamond. I was like, I'm on the space shuttle,
Yeah, that
you reached the first crossing restriction at 10,240 knots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny.
And
it was incredible though. And the captain I flew with there, it turns out he's pretty well known in the company. And so I've made a lot of really amazing connections and networks, and he taught me a lot of stuff on it. It was just so much fun. Like I am super excited about what I'm doing. I'm not even mad. Some people have made comments on my social media about sitting standby. Like, you know what? I'm just excited and happy to be here. Like you guys don't even know.
It's part of the experience.
I'm sure. But I think some people forget, they look back on it. They're like, oh, standby was terrible. Your life must be terrible. And I'm like, actually, I'm having a really great time. And I think maybe they don't like to hear that. They want me to be miserable too, but that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Misery loves company.
Yep.
So don't listen to that. So
Yeah.
that ferry flights were always fun for me. And especially when you had a flight attendant on board with no passengers, obviously, because it's a ferry flight. And you, at the time, you could offer them the jump seat. And because most of the time flight attendants have no idea once the door closes what's going on. So you offer them the jump seat and they sit there and you take off. And like you said, it's like a rocket, man. But when you get onto mainline, and I just wanted to share this, as you mentioned, taking off like a rocket. We were in a Neo the other day, leaving Phoenix with 97 passengers on board.
Oh my gosh.
And we're climbing. We're doing a high-speed climb because it's the go-home leg. And so we're doing like 330 knots, somewhere around 18,000 feet, and just climbing nice and easy, 1,500 feet a minute, just screaming out of there. And ATC says, can you slow it to 290, please? And the captain says, sure, flip. And I don't know if you can see that climb rate.
Hi.
Is that 8,300?
8,300 feet a minute. And look at the airspeed trend vector. It is not like through the floor. It's just slowly climbing at 13 degrees pitch, 8,300 feet a minute. And it kept it for 30 seconds before it started to pitch back over. So yeah. And that's a Neo, an Air A321 Neo. It holds 200 people. So yeah.
Wow.
That was fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I just thought I'd share that with you. But yeah, so the FMS system, AMA, those are systems, and I think performance is usually something that gives a lot of people a little bit of trouble. Kevin, what do you think? Have you seen on the line with your fellow pilots and the people you've flown with so far that they have a really good grasp of performance with the training amount that SandPiper gives during a long-term ground?
Yes and no. Like when you have to do, when it's just the standard stuff that comes out of the printer, yes. But it's when you have to do ferry flights and stuff like that. Like I had to help you guys out.
Oh yeah, we were like,
I got a phone call. Hey, how do you look up the the VA. I'm like, oh yeah, you got to type this in, look at the back of the checklist, stuff like that. And
well, when you don't do them all the time,
yeah, when you don't do them all the time, yeah, you just come out of it. So the normal stuff, yes, people are really good, really strong on it. But when you have to do the non-normal things that you don't do every day, that's when people struggle, which is normal.
Yeah. Well, and what I've noticed about this job is that you can learn as absolutely much as you want to learn. You can choose to be, I just get by with the basic, information, or I can get into the books. And the thing that I love about Kevin is that he'll literally just pull out a section and he'll be like, oh, did you know that the airplane, ... And he'll literally go into the AOM and start digging out information that we really didn't go into depth over in training, or maybe they did and I forgot because, but there's a lot of really good info in there, and you can really choose to be, an expert on this airplane if you choose.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. And sometimes I got to admit, I'm guilty of, like, I like the trivia. Like Kevin, I like to dive in. That's why Rob and I were Czech Airmen. It wasn't because of the fame and the money and the power. It was because we enjoyed getting asked a question and then not knowing the answer and having to dive into the books to find the answer, and then, filing that, putting it in the back of your head in the event that you might need to recall that quickly. You go, oh yeah, I remember that. Just the other day, we landed in Denver at night, and there was a super tug taxiing without an aircraft behind it, just a super tug taxiing, and the air traffic controller told the super tug to give way to us as we were clearing to go into the ramp. And so I read that back, and I looked at the captain and I said, hey, did you know that if they didn't say anything, we would have to have given way to him? And he's like, what? A super tug? I'm like, yeah, a super tug on a taxiway has priority versus an aircraft. And he goes, no way. I said, yeah. He goes, where'd you find that? I'm like, in the AIM. So it's all these little tidbits, and if you really are interested in doing the job and not spending the time to do all that stuff, you're still going to be a safe pilot. You're still going to have a great career. But it's almost entertaining, and a great way to spend time is to dive into the books when you get a chance. I had a captain once told me how I prepare is every month I pick a section, and in cruise, when you have nothing better to do, if you, instead of reading a paper, I'm dating myself now, instead of reading a newspaper, you just pick out a section and go through and learn something, or reread something you haven't read in a couple of years. And then
like I told you, I'll just go through and read a section, and I'll always find something I don't know. I can find 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And another thing that I like to do as well is if I have maintenance on the airplane, I always like to see what they're doing. One time they were going into the avionics bay, and I was like, because they were going to replace a module, and I was like, I'm going down there. And so they're watching them. It was so interesting to.
Did you ever go through the wheelchair thing in the back of the airplane to look back there and see what they're doing? Hey, what are you guys doing? Behind all the galley carts?
No.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't seen the aft one.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one. I think that's the aft electronics bay. But I had that happen once. But I was going to say, a lot of times in aviation, at least in my experience, is, the test comes first and then the lesson follows. So, and that's when I do a lot of my studying is I come across a situation where, we're live, we're on the spot, and you got to get it done. You got to do it. And, you end up having to scramble because, there's something that you have to do, in particular procedure. So, you're like, okay, I don't know what it is, but I got to find it. Okay, bam, found it in the books. Let's do it. And then after that, we get on our way, have 2 or 3 hours to kill. And I'm like, okay, what else do I really need to know about this stuff? And you start scamming through it. And, then you file that, like you said, Tony, in the back of your head and you move on. And then the next time that happens, you're like, I remember this. Let's, a little further knowledge on this now. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Christy, I know you need to get going because you have a base day. What is a base day all about? So
once you're done with IOE, you basically have this Indoc base day where you go and they spend a couple hours with you just teaching you everything that's very specific to that base. Because what a lot of people will do is, let's say you're based in Chicago, but you live in DFW. So a lot of people will actually get their IOE flights out of DFW. So they don't really know a lot about Chicago. They'll get a base day assigned to them out of Chicago so that they could start to learn things. Now, it just so happens I live in DFW, did my IOE here, and this is where I'm based. So I'm really excited to see what else I'm going to learn. I'm sure there will be stuff that I don't already know, but and I'll get to meet some of the other people there. There's going to be, I think, 4 of us today, they said. So plus whoever else in the chief pilot's office.
Yeah. Is Annie Angle still the chief pilot there?
Yes.
All right. Tell her Rob DeJesus said hi.
I will let her know that. I'm sure she'll know what.
Oh, she knows. We've flown quite a few trips together, and man, I don't know how we landed the plane a few times because we were just laughing our asses off all the way down final over whatever nonsense we were talking about. But we've had some good trips together, and she's a great chief pilot and a great pilot and a great leader. So tell her I said hi.
It couldn't have been your Billy Bob teeth that you were wearing at the time.
I think she saw them. I think I had them, actually.
We need to get a picture of that posted soon. But okay. The base days, you'll meet your chief pilot. You'll find out where your mailboxes are. And most importantly, make sure you introduce yourself to the secretary or the admin. Because when you call in sick or you have a problem or you have a question, who answers the phone first is who you want to be on a name by name basis, one-on-one, because that'll make or break how easy you're taken care of. So yeah, definitely make sure you introduce yourself to the admin and enjoy your day.
All right. Thank you guys so much.
Best of luck to you.
Well, I just want to say thank you again for joining us. We really enjoyed getting to hear about your experience over at SandPiper. I wish you a long and fruitful career, but not too long because we expect you over at Mainline here soon enough. It's an exciting time to be in the industry with all the growth and all the upcoming changes that we are foreseeing here in the near future. I think that both of you are going to really have a good time at the regional. Enjoy it while you can because it's a completely different bag. It's more of a family at the regional level because you get to know people, you get to fly with them for, months on end sometimes. Whereas at Mainline, it's just such a big operation that you might never see the pilot next to you ever again. So, definitely enjoy that time. And by all means, make good choices.
Speaking of that, what are they saying is the flow time now for SandPiper?
Yes, I don't know who that is, but
like 6 years.
Yeah, 6 years.
Wow, that's pretty good. That's really good.
They're telling us 4 over here.
4.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's moving quick.
Well, I'm sure at like PSA and Piedmont they have different times too, but
yeah.
That every carrier has this magic number. Oh, you're going to upgrade at this time.
Yeah.
If it was today or tomorrow, but next week it'll be add on a year or 2 years.
I'm sure it's a fluid number. It with the way things are in our industry right now, where you have streaky highs and lows and things like that with the shots and COVIDs and furloughs. It's a roller coaster. So it'll go up, it'll go down, it'll go up, it'll go down.
Yeah.
So
the jab refusals are actually a good thing for the junior pilots.
Yeah.
So if these pilots are going to quit and refuse to get the jab, that means you move up a number.
Yeah. I hate to gain a number that way, but it's just the way everybody has choices.
Exactly.
So
exactly,
and that's the freedom of it. Unfortunately, it's not the entire freedom that we want, but that's the way it's turning out to be right now.
And Christy, congratulations with your latest episode of Taking Off. You kind of talked about the Southwest fiasco as we did earlier here on the show as well. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think that it's an unfortunate coincidence of just, it's a combination of things happening. People are saying that it wasn't a planned stick out, but that some pilots are afraid that they're going to wind up being fired. So they're trying to use up their sick time now so that, if it does come to that, they don't lose it. Because my understanding is they pay it out at a percentage versus being able to utilize it 100%. So
yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
that with the weather, there's people at ATC. I mean, the industry's in flux right now, honestly.
yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, definitely stay safe out there. Enjoy your time on reserve. I don't think you'll be on reserve very long with all the new hire classes. I follow the SandPiper page, and their class sizes are getting pretty impressive. So yeah, that's fantastic for you and for Kevin. So congratulations on the new house, and thank you so much for joining us.
thank you guys.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
As our flight is drawing to an end, we would like to thank all of you for coming along with us on this journey. A very special thank you to Christy and Kevin for joining us today and really having a fantastic time listening to their experiences, both with Christy's IOE experience and with Kevin's support. Please help us out by sharing this podcast online and with your friends. Be sure to subscribe or follow to the Squawk Ident podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. We also love receiving listener feedback. You can send us an email or even audio feedback via our website at www.aviatortony.com. That's Alpha Victor, the number 8, Romeo Tango Oscar November Yankee.com. There you will find audio archives from the show, photos from the flight line, a guest book photo tab. There's also the Squawk Ident Pilot Shop, where you can find t-shirts, mugs, hats, and such. And a small proceed of all the sales goes towards helping to finance this podcast. You can also contribute to the Squawk Ident podcast financially right from the homepage of the website. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram users can find us on Squawk Ident podcast. Also, a big final thank you to Rob D for joining me today. And thank you to all of you for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down out there. Be safe and take care of each other. See ya.
All right. See ya.
Bye, y'all. Are you listening out there? Keep listening. Snowden, we're not going anywhere. Stand your ground. All right, let me just stop here.